May your day and week be truly blessed.
Absolutely.
So, I want you to imagine a king who is just completely terrified of this massive group of migrating people.
Right, the Israelites.
Exactly. And instead of doing the normal thing, hiring a mercenary army or building up his defenses, he hires an international spiritual hitman.
Which is such a wild concept to us today.
It really is. He drags this famous diviner up to a mountaintop, slaughters 14 animals in this highly specific configuration, and get this, dissects their livers.
Yeah, it's incredibly visceral.
Right. All in this desperate attempt to hack the divine realm as if it's a computer system.
That's a great way to put it.
Today we are taking a deep dive into Numbers chapter 23, and we're drawing from the really comprehensive study notes of the Holman and NAA study Bibles.
They give us such great historical context for this.
They really do. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore this massive clash between ancient Near Eastern magical practices and the absolute sovereignty of Israel's God.
Because it's not just a weird ancient story. It's a clash of worldviews.
Exactly. We're going to unpack the bizarre rituals, the ancient theology, and really the profound psychological drama of this whole standoff.
Yeah, it's intense.
It is. And honestly, by the end of this conversation, it's going to completely change how you view ancient magic and really the human desire to manipulate the divine.
I mean, it exposes the underlying spiritual mechanics of that whole ancient world.
Yeah.
You have King Balak of Moab looking out at the Israelite camp.
And he's terrified. Right.
Oh, completely. He sees their numbers and knows a conventional military strike is just way too risky. He wants a supernatural preemptive strike.
Like crippling them before a sword is even drawn.
Exactly. So to get that strike, he brings in Balaam. And the geography here is actually super important.
Right, because Balaam isn't a local guy.
No, not at all. He's from Aram, which is hundreds of miles away in ancient Mesopotamia.
Wow, so he bypassed all local Moabite priests?
Yeah, he paid an exorbitant fee to import the ancient world's equivalent of like a top-tier spiritual consultant.
It's all about prestige for Balak, isn't it?
Totally. In the ancient Near East, Mesopotamia was seen as the absolute center of advanced divination and magic.
So bringing Balaam in is this massive royal flex.
Right, he's signaling just how serious he is about annihilating this perceived threat.
So they finally meet, and they immediately establish the rules of engagement. Balaam tells the king to build 7 altars.
7 altars, yeah.
And then they sacrifice exactly 7 bulls and 7 rams. Balaam just stands by the offering, basically acting as the high priest representing the king.
It's a very formal, very rigid setup.
Well, looking at this precise 7 ritual, I mean, it really functions like a video game cheat code.
A cheat code?
Yeah, or like a magical vending machine. Balak and Balaam assume that if they input the exact right currency, 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams, they can just press a button and the curse they order will drop right out.
That's actually a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because to the ancient reader, Balaam was using a highly standardized, peer-reviewed methodology.
Wait, peer-reviewed, like this was an established science.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just some random dramatic flair. The study notes point out a very well-known Babylonian text that perfectly parallels this exact ritual.
Really? The exact same number?
Yep. In that Mesopotamian text, major deities like Ea, Shamash, and Marduk are worshipped by pouring sheep's blood over exactly 7 altars.
Wow. Why 7, though?
Well, the number 7 represented completeness and cosmic perfection across the ancient Near East.
So they are essentially trying to build this perfect, irresistible trap for the divine.
Precisely. You have to remember, the underlying theology back then was highly transactional.
Right, like a business deal.
Yeah, the gods were viewed as powerful, sure, but they were ultimately dependent on humans for sustenance.
Like they needed to be fed.
Exactly. The gods were hungry, they enjoyed the smell of a massive barbecue, and if you threw them a grand enough feast, they were obligated by the rules of reciprocity to do you a favor.
So Balaam is basically presenting this flawless bribe.
Right, on behalf of King Balak.
But this is exactly where the whole transactional formula collides with a god who simply refuses to be bought.
The whole system just short circuits.
It really does.
Yeah.
So Balak is standing there, right, fully anticipating destruction to just rain down on the Israelite camp.
He's waiting for the payout.
Exactly. Balaam goes off to receive the divine message, and the text says, God meets Balaam and puts the word in his mouth.
Which is a huge plot twist.
Right. Balaam comes back to the king, opens his mouth to deliver this incredibly expensive curse, and out comes a poetic blessing instead.
And it's a blessing that's specifically reinforces Israel's unique status.
Yeah, tell us about the specific wording he uses.
Well, Balaam notes that Israel is a people dwelling alone.
Dwelling alone, what does that signify there?
It's a profound commentary on them being a chosen, distinct people. They are separated by divine protection from the surrounding nations and all their political machinations.
He also mentions the dust of Jacob, right?
Yes, which is a massive theological callback.
Because from the foundational theology in Genesis, God promised Abraham his descendants would be as numerous as the dust of the earth.
Exactly. Balaam is echoing the Abrahamic covenant itself.
That is wild. He is using Israel's own foundational theology against the king, who just paid a fortune to destroy them.
It's a complete subversion of everything Balak expected. I mean, he paid top dollar for annihilation.
And instead, he's just forced to stand there and listen to a poetic affirmation of Israel's protection.
Delivered by his own hired gun.
Right. Which actually brings up a huge question for me. If Balaam is this renowned, highly paid diviner who traveled hundreds of miles for this massive payday, why doesn't he just lie?
That is the big question.
I mean, Balak is the king with the gold. Why doesn't Balaam just say, yep, curse is active, they're doomed, grab his silver, and run back to Aram?
Well, that question really cuts to the core contrast the text is making between the God of Israel and Mesopotamian deities.
How so?
In the broader ancient Near Eastern worldview, gods were capricious and moody.
Like overgrown humans?
Exactly. And more importantly, they were subject to the universe, just like humans were.
Wait, the gods were subject to the universe?
Yeah, which meant they could be manipulated through sorcery, bribery, or divination. If a human diviner knew the right incantations or did the right sacrifices, they could essentially force a god's hand.
Ah, so magic was essentially the technology they used to override the will of the gods.
That's a great way to think about it. But the God of Israel is presented as fundamentally and radically different here.
He exists completely outside of that system.
Right. He cannot be manipulated by human rituals. The text is showing that God's hand protects his people from even the absolute best ancient specialists.
So Balaam can't just fake it.
No, because in the ancient mindset, words of blessing and cursing had actual metaphysical power. They weren't just words. But Balaam finds he has zero power to alter what God has ordained.
God is sovereign over the actual words forming in the diviner's mouth.
Exactly. No matter how many altars you build, you cannot hack the God of Israel.
Man, so Balaam tells Balak he can only say what God puts in his mouth. But Balak is just blinded by this massive sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, he's in way too deep at this point.
He really is. He completely refuses to accept that his magic is useless against this specific god. So he assumes the problem isn't the deity.
Right.
He assumes the problem is the location.
Which is such a fascinating psychological defense mechanism. Balak reasons that, well, the ritual formula was perfect, so there must be some environmental variable throwing off the magic.
It's exactly like someone waving their phone in the air, pacing around a room, trying to find a better geographical spot to get a signal.
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Balak decides the curse signal is just bad right there. So he takes Balaam to the field of Zophim, right at the top of Mount Pisgah.
A very deliberate change of scenery.
Right, because from this new vantage point, he can only see the outermost edges of the Israelite camp.
His strategy shifts.
Yeah, he thinks maybe cursing just a small fraction of them will require less magical energy than cursing the whole nation at once. And so they repeat the exact same process.
7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams.
But the choice of Mount Pisgah itself is really deliberate, according to the study notes.
Oh, very much so. Historically, this location wasn't just a high ground for the military. It functioned as an ancient observatory.
Okay, an observatory for the stars.
Yes. And this requires us to look a bit closer at what divination actually entailed back then.
It wasn't just staring into crystal balls.
No, it was considered a sophisticated, culturally sanctioned pseudoscience. They relied heavily on celestial omens and astrology.
Which is why they needed a high-altitude observatory.
Exactly. But they also relied on far more visceral practices, like hepatoscopy.
Hepatoscopy,
Right.
which is the dissection and reading of animal livers.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
I think it's so easy for us and for you listening to kind of sanitize these ancient biblical rituals in our heads.
We picture a dignified guy in clean robes looking thoughtfully up at the clouds.
Right. But in reality, Balaam is like elbow deep in the blood and organs of these freshly slaughtered bulls and rams. He's literally pulling out livers on a mountain peak.
The physical reality of it was incredibly bloody. But there is a specific twisted logic to why they focused on the liver.
Why the liver specifically?
To the ancient Mesopotamians, the liver was the heaviest organ, so it was considered the absolute center of vitality, emotion, and life.
Okay.
They believed that when an animal was sacrificed to a god, the god's mind and intentions were perfectly mirrored in the physical structure of that specific animal's liver.
Wow. But how did they actually read it? Like, were they just looking for random dark spots or something?
It was actually a highly technical, documented process. Archaeologists have found these ancient clay models of sheep livers in Mesopotamia, completely covered in cuneiform writing.
Wait, like practice livers.
Basically textbooks. Diviners mapped the liver almost like it was a microcosm of the heavens.
So the liver was like a star map.
Exactly. Yeah. Different lobes and sections corresponded to different gods or constellations or even regions of the empire.
That is fascinating.
They would dissect the liver and look for anomalies, lesions, or specific shapes in the lobes, and then cross-reference those against centuries of recorded omens to interpret the divine will.
Wow.
The study notes also mention they observed the lining of animal intestines to predict the future.
It really just emphasizes the sheer desperation of King Balak. I mean, he is funding this massive, grisly operation, dissecting 14 animals, trying to map their livers to the constellations from a mountaintop, just desperately searching for some magical loophole against his enemies.
And this text really reinforces why these practices were so strictly forbidden for Israel in the broader biblical context.
Right, Israel wasn't allowed to do any of this.
No. Israel didn't need to dissect organs or read the stars to know where they stood with God. God's presence and his covenant were their defense.
The contrast is huge. You have the elaborate, desperate rituals of Moab and Aram up on the mountain, and the quiet security of Israel just resting in their camp below.
Exactly.
So, Balak is up on Mount Pisgah. He's surrounded by altars and smoke, hoping this new astronomical vantage point and the liver reading will finally unlock his curse.
But it doesn't work.
No. The message God delivers through Balaam the second time is this massive show of divine sovereignty that just completely devastates Balak's entire worldview.
Balaam returns with the second oracle, and he opens by attacking the very foundation of all that divination.
He declares God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind.
Which is a direct hit to the transactional theology.
Then he describes God as having the strength of a wild ox, and he follows that up by comparing Israel to a lioness that rises up and won't rest until it devours its prey and drinks the blood of the slain.
The imagery is absolutely terrifying.
Right? Balak pays an exorbitant fee for a protective curse, and instead he gets a direct, incredibly violent military threat delivered right to his face.
He's poking a sleeping lion.
Exactly. But I really want to zero in on the wild ox imagery from the sources. Why use a wild ox specifically? Why not a bear or a massive storm?
Well, in the broader ancient Near Eastern culture, rival gods like the high god El and the storm god Baal were historically depicted as bulls, or sometimes as men with bull horns.
Okay, so the bull was a common motif.
Very common. The bull was the universal symbol of untamable power, fertility, and divine authority. But the text here doesn't use the word for a standard domesticated temple bull.
Oh, it doesn't.
No, it references the ancient wild ox, the aurochs, which was this massive, incredibly aggressive beast known for its devastating power.
So describing Israel's God with the unstoppable force of a wild ox is a culturally resonant rebuke of Moab's specific deities.
It is an absolute theological takedown.
Yeah.
It's communicating to Balak, you think your local gods are powerful bulls. The God of Israel is the ultimate devastating wild ox. Your gods are domesticated cattle compared to him.
Wow. And when you pair that terrifying imagery with the opening line, that God does not lie or change. His mind, the psychological devastation for Balak is just complete.
Because divination is entirely built on the premise that the gods can change their minds.
If you bribe them enough.
Exactly. But God is declaring himself immutable. He doesn't suffer from human egoism. He isn't fickle. And he certainly doesn't need Balak's barbecue.
Right.
When God makes a promise to protect Israel, that promise is final. Immutability is the ultimate threat to a magical worldview.
So Balak's entire strategy of destruction completely falls apart. He's standing on his expensive celestial observatory, smelling the smoke of his 14 sacrifices, and he's just been told that Israel's God is an unstoppable force and that Israel is a lioness about to drink his blood.
It's the worst-case scenario for him.
It really is. And at this point, Balak is so blinded by his sunk cost fallacy that he reaches this breaking point of just comical desperation.
It really is funny.
He literally turns to Balaam and says, "Look, if you won't curse them, at least don't bless them."
Like, just say nothing at all, stop talking.
Just cancel the transaction.
But he still drags Balaam to yet another peak.
He just won't quit.
No, he takes him to Mount Peor, looking out over a wasteland area called Jeshimon. He is operating purely on irrational momentum at this point.
Still assuming the divine realm just needs a different physical view of the battlefield?
Exactly. But when they arrive at this third location, there is a crucial shift in Balaam's behavior.
The narrative momentum really changes completely here.
Yeah, according to the study materials, by this third attempt, the futility of the magic is undeniably clear to the mercenary.
Balaam gets it.
He does. In the first two attempts, Balaam goes off to look for signs, right? To practice his divination, to read the omens and the livers.
Right.
But at Mount Peor, he stops. He completely abandons the tools of his trade.
Oh, wow.
The sheer force of God's unyielding protection over Israel has dismantled his entire professional playbook. Balaam realizes that there is no enchantment against Jacob and no divination against Israel.
The magic is basically dead on arrival.
Yep.
Balaam just looks out at the wilderness, and the Spirit of God comes upon him to deliver a third blessing without any need for altars or animal organs.
None of it.
Balak's incredibly expensive campaign of mountain hopping and cosmic manipulation was utterly useless. He was trying to fight a god who simply cannot be bought or outmaneuvered.
Which reframes this entire historical account. It isn't just a fascinating look at ancient rituals.
Right, it's not just a history lesson.
No, it is a profound statement about the nature of the divine and how humanity interacts with it.
You know, it's so easy for us and for you listening right now to judge King Balak for dissecting livers and building altars.
We obviously don't drag spiritual mercenaries to the tops of mountains to cast hexes on our rivals today.
Thankfully. But this transactional view of the divine is incredibly human.
It really is. It forces us to ask how often we still try to build our own metaphorical seven altars today.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we might not use animal sacrifices, but we often try to perfectly orchestrate our actions, right? Maybe through a flawless morning routine, a specific formula of prayer, or, how much money we donate.
Well, I see. Thinking that if we just input the right sequence, we can manipulate our circumstances.
Exactly. We still treat the divine like a vending machine. We try to force an outcome or hack the system rather than resting in a God who is immutable, who cannot be bribed, and who is already fiercely protective of his promises.
Are we trusting the sovereign power of the wild ox, or are we still just walking around the mountain, dissecting our circumstances, trying to find a better signal?
That's the real question.
It's a phenomenal question to sit with as we close our deep dive into Numbers 23 today. Thank you so much for joining us on this historical and theological journey. God blesses all of you.